Welcome everybody. I'm Elizabeth Doherty Thomas, the co-founder of the Doherty Relationship Institute. I am really excited for you all to hear uh, about two articles that my father, Bill Doherty, wrote, one in 2013 and one very recently. These are conversations he and I have a lot in our own conversations, and so I am thrilled to be able to let you all in on what I think are really, really interesting concepts and principles. A little logistics before I turn it over to him. We're going to be putting the core presentation on YouTube for free. So if you liked this presentation and you wanted to share it with anybody in the field, you are free to do that when we get that uploaded. We will be having questions after the presentation, and you will not be on YouTube, so you are free to talk. We're going to just edit his presentation for you. So without further ado, welcome to my father, Bill Doherty, co-founder of the Doherty Relationship Institute.
Right. So hi, everybody. Happy to be able to talk about some ideas that have been percolating for some time with me and that I think are missing in the field of psychotherapy in general and even in couples therapy that I want to lay out. First part of this will be a conceptual with some examples, and that is as I talk about relational intelligence and systems intelligence more generally. And then I'll be going to Article 2, which is about when therapy is stuck, because I think these ideas I'm going to be talking about will fit that particular challenge because we all experience that I'll be describing in a little bit. Okay, and then we'll have some time for questions. In fact, a fair amount of time for questions and reflections afterwards. So relational intelligence and systems intelligence on presenting here on Valentine's Day as I look at February 14th, 2025. So the main ideas here is to go beyond emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence defined as understanding one's emotions, being able to self-regulate and read others' emotions. This has been an important concept in the field for some time. It's out there in the lay public domain as well. And I'm arguing that this form of intelligence is necessary but not sufficient for dealing with the complexities of couple and family relationships, both for individuals who are in couples and family relationships and for therapists as we help people navigate the complexities of couple and family relationships. So this has been sometimes called EQ, and what widely talked about in our society. A lot of businesses try to screen for the emotional intelligence or EQ. And I think that individual psychotherapy fundamentally has focused on emotional intelligence. So it's I'm going to be saying it's not enough, but I don't want to in any way indicate it's not important. It's the sort of it's a foundation building block for the other forms of intelligence that I'm going to be talking about. So the second one is relational intelligence, which I'm defining as the ability to interact effectively in dyadic or one-to-one relationships. It adds interpersonal understanding and action to the more intrapsychic emotional intelligence. And so it's got two components. The first is the understanding and the insight or understanding of relational dynamics and patterns that emerge between two people, such as pursuer distance or patterns in couples. And so this idea of emergent properties comes out of systems theory, that you can't just take person A and persons B individual psychology and fully understand the dynamic that occurs between them. There are emergent properties, and therefore knowledge of emergent properties that are not reducible to the emotional elements of an individual, and therefore cannot be fully understood in terms of emotional intelligence or EQ. So insight and action, the ability to constructively engage and modify those patterns. So I'm defining relational intelligence as an adaptive form of intelligence. And this comes out of, there's a lot of literature about intelligence. It isn't just insight or understanding, it's also the ability to act. So understanding dynamics that are beyond one-to-one, and here I'm saying two people, and then the ability to operate with that understanding. And then, so I'm saying then, to be more explicit, that RQ, I'm just coining that term, relational intelligence, is more than EQ because it addresses patterns and interactional dynamics that arise, as I said. And so here's an example. Emotional intelligence helps somebody manage their anger during conflict, but relational intelligence is needed to identify and change the patterns that might be causing the conflict, like maybe caught in over-functioning and under-functioning roles, and some of my anger and resentment may come from getting into over-responsibility, doing more than I think is fair. For the other person, their anger may be related to being treated like an adolescent in an adult relationship. So the pattern feeds the anger and the ability to understand that my anger is coming out of a pattern, interpersonal pattern, and how do I not only deal constructively with how do I express my anger? Of course, that's important. That's the EQ, but the RQ would be, oh, okay, this is emerging out of an interactional dynamic between the two of us, and rather than just become better and better at expressing my resentment, how can I modify and empathizing with your resentment? How can I and we modify the patterns that are causing this? So it's more than RQ is more than EQ, but of course it needs EQ. You have to be able to understand emotion and read emotion as a prelude, really, to understanding the interactional dynamics. And so here's something that helped me in my formulation of relational intelligence, because some people, and I think some models of therapy, perhaps mostly individual psychotherapy, would suggest that very high levels of EQ, emotional intelligence, would kind of automatically lead people to be more constructive and have more relational intelligence in their couple and dyadic relationships. But some of what I've run across really argues differently, and that is, if you want to think of relational intelligence and emotional intelligence like dials on an old audio system where you dial up, the bass and the treble, whatever. Some people have a more developed EQ, emotional intelligence, and so I'm calling these sometimes highly therapized people. It can reflect on their own emotions, understand the origins of their emotional problems, but have very limited awareness of their own role in co-creating troublesome interpersonal interactions. So I've had quite a number of therapists in therapy over the years, and therapists, if you ask them about how they see themselves as contributing to problems in their, say, marital relationship, they will often give you quite, extensive conversation about the psychological issues that they bring to the relationship, their attachment wounds from the past, their trauma from the past, unfinished family of origin work, their own, just their own self-esteem issues, control dynamic, control issues, whatever. I mean, they give you a lot, but they can be actually quite blind to how they are coming across in their relationship, and the interactional patterns in their relationship. So they might, if they're sympathetic to their spouse, they may actually say, we have two wounded people here, whose issues are colliding. But that's at a 10,000-foot level to actually see what the dynamic is, the interaction patterns, and there are parts of it They may not be any better than regular folks who don't have an emotional vocabulary, an in-depth emotional vocabulary. And in addition, what I've seen is if people have higher levels of emotional intelligence, but not corresponding levels of relational intelligence, they can misuse, they can weaponize, if you will, their emotional vocabulary for power in their intimate relationships. So it's something I've seen a fair amount of, and it's particularly tempting for therapists, for couples therapists, to be overly impressed with the emotional insight and expressiveness of one partner, and assume that they are far more advanced personally and interpersonally, when it may not be the case at all. So that's why I think even clinically, not just conceptually, these are important to distinguish the EQ from the RQ. Now, systems intelligence, defining as the ability to effectively interact in multilateral relationships. I'm talking about these as 3 persons or more, such as families, work groups, dealing with social institutions, the people in social institutions. So it involves understanding interpersonal systems beyond the dyad, and the practical ability to act constructively within those systems. For those of you who read my article on this, I start out in the article, sort of because the article is a theoretical one, with systems intelligence, and then I say that relational intelligence is a subset of that. And so conceptually, that's how I think of it. And it's a matter of the conceptual level, the theoretical level. Here in the presentation, I'm starting with relational intelligence as the dyad, if you will, and then going to the triad and beyond. But it's also possible to see the larger umbrella term of systems intelligence, because dyads are systems. So that's a little conceptual aside here that I explain in my paper. So the scope here is 3 or more people, multilateral systems, which are far more complex than a dyad, than a one-to-one. And so there are levels of understanding and behavioral competencies, how do you engage, that are involved in multilateral, 3-person or more interpersonal systems that are not reducible to relational or dyadic intelligence, just as relational can't be reduced to emotional intelligence. And so here's where the repertoire of family systems theory comes into play in terms of understanding. So triangles, coalitions, people having differential loyalties to different family members, co-parenting conflict is going to involve the children. And so that's different from just couple issues, because children, certainly after they're infants, play an active role in the playing out of conflict. And this is lifetime, actually, because you can have a couple with adult children, and you can have a lot of co-parenting conflict there. The whole idea of generational boundaries. So if you have a parent confiding inappropriately to their adolescent or adult child, this is a generational boundary issue that may show up in the couple relationship, but is not reducible to the couple relationship. So we're now into higher levels of complexity than we have when we have just a dyad. So application of these ideas to working with couples. So many couple issues I'm arguing involve third parties, such as children, in-laws, other family of origin members, friends, employers, even. When there are chronic health issues, there are the couple has a chronic relationship with the healthcare system. Medical providers may be key in the lives of the couple. Support groups. So you want to think about the couple relationship. Our models of couples therapy primarily deal with the dyadic relationship, which then would translate into helping people with their relational intelligence, and that's really quite important. I think that a lot of individual therapy doesn't even deal much with RQ, which I think is a serious problem. But here, since I'm addressing a lot of what I'm saying here to couples therapists, I'm arguing that many couple issues have to involve broader systemic thinking on the part of the therapist to really adequately help the couple. The tools then of emotional intelligence and relational dyadic intelligence are not enough. And so here's some examples. Couples and step families in particular cannot, in my view, be treated well without systemic intelligence on the part of the therapist. We're dealing with divided loyalties. The relationship between a step parent and their stepchild is all caught up in and affected by the relationship of that child to their original parent, their biological parent or adoptive parent. And you can't really understand their relationship without between the step parent and the child, unless you understand the outside relationship to the original parent. And then if there is conflict within the couple about the step parenting relationship with the kid, you can't just I'm arguing, work with the couple, seeing them as an isolated unit without taking into account those step family dynamics, in this case, divided loyalties. Similarly, the co-parenting issues in a remarriage or step family are, in my view, not reducible to what we talk about in our models of therapy, whether you're more oriented to a communication skills approach, or say to a psychodynamic approach or an attachment approach. I mean, all, really very viable ways to work with couples. But if you're dealing not with the marital or couple relationship, but with the co-parenting part of their relationship, if you get what I'm saying, there are third parties here, and there are fourth parties and fifth parties, because you're dealing with the couple, but there are sometimes exes on both sides, and then kids sometimes with both sides. So you can have, in a heterosexual couple, you can have his, hers, and their kids, and then your couple in therapy is having, relational struggles. And it very well may be that understanding the complex system they're in around their parenting, co-parenting roles, the loyalty binds, the role of the kids and the stepkids and all of this, and the exes, and sometimes the grandparents. I'm arguing that to help couples in this complex multilateral system, the therapist needs to understand the relational dynamics involved. And that to simply treat this as a dyadic issue with our tools from dyadic therapy, we don't do justice to these folks. So, for example, I mean, there's some psychoeducational aspects of working with remarried couples and stepfamilies. Patricia Papineau has written wonderfully about this in her books, where you help a couple. You may be working with the couple, not with the whole family, but you're helping them educationally understand the nature of the biological parent relationship and the step-parent relationship are very different. Their role patterns really have to be different. There's good research on this. And so you're helping them with their co-parenting, and not just helping them negotiate how they want to do their family, because a lot of times people are trying to negotiate equality in their co-parenting in a step family that is not workable. It may be workable with their kids, but not with stepkids. And so what I began to see over the years, and there's some research to support this, that there are many couples in step families who, in terms of their couple relationship, if they were not parenting in a step family, they would be doing fine. They would not be in your office. But their fundamental problems are related to their co-parenting. And the research that kind of supports this is that the higher divorce rates for remarriages are primarily due to the parenting issue. When they have stepkids, that's where the divorce rate tends to be higher because they're at more risk. And so the other group would be couples on the brink of divorce. And many of you are familiar with discernment counseling, something I developed for couples on the brink of divorce. Many couples have external stakeholders and influencers. If they have children, of course, but also family members, friends, individual therapists who are weighing in on this. And so there is a kind of a multilateral field of influence around couples when they're actually the two phases, right? When they are getting married, lots of these stakeholders out there, okay? The wedding planning and who approves and disapproves, all that sort of stuff. And then at a phase where they may be thinking of breaking up, or somebody's thinking of breaking up, you get other stakeholders influencing and weighing in and serving as confidants and so on. And then particularly, I have particular interest in therapy, particularly individual therapist roles here, because individual therapists, in my view, who don't take a relational and systemic viewpoint, often become just the advocate for who's in the room, and they are not applying good systemic and relational thinking to their work with their clients. So that's the first part here. That's the part on systems intelligence, relational intelligence, as a way to expand our understanding of how people can function effectively in their dyadic and family and other roles, and how therapists can apply this way of thinking to individuals, to couples, to families, oops, I just moved ahead there. So how we can apply all of these is how I'm approaching this. This can be useful for people. It can be useful for therapists. Okay, so the second part of my presentation is about when therapy is going nowhere. It's an article I published in 2013 and found out that recently I found out that it's still one of the most downloaded articles in the Psychotherapy Networker magazine, 12 years later. So I thought, well, I guess people are finding it useful. And so I want to summarize that and tie it into the systemic systems intelligence that I've been talking about here. And the basic application is that we're dealing with, in therapy, with a therapeutic system, not just a relationship, but a system. And I'm going to apply this mostly to couples therapy, because then you have a three-way system. And when therapy gets stuck, which I'm saying is when the therapy was once productive, they made gains, they were engaged, but there's no longer progress. And the therapy feels like it's stalled out, the sense of going round and around. I've referred to it in my article as Groundhog's Day therapy, like with the movie. But the clients keep returning. And so this can be kind of frustrating for the therapist. And therapists can say, well, they're resisting for the progress. One of them is not willing to change. They won't go deep. Their problems are are too serious, or or I guess I'm not very good. I'm not a good therapist, at least for them. And so these interpretations may have truth in them, but they're not systemic enough. So I'm going to argue that a benefit of thinking systemically about the therapeutic system it can have some payoffs for how we deal with couples that we're working with over time, where the relationship, the therapeutic system gets stalled. And so some mistakes, though, what therapists do with stuck cases, lurching. By the way, over a long career, I've done all of these. I go to a workshop and try something new, and then come back and try it on people. In the old days, we used to go to a Jay Haley workshop and see paradoxical interventions, and then try something brand new after 8 months of therapy, and people go, "What the heck was that you just told me to do?" So acting as if the client's decisions reflect on our competence. So again, feeling over responsible. Why can't I do better? Acting like a disapproving parent. So, we can increasingly get more critical in our interpretations. And what I always look for, and this shows up in case consultation, is when there is a negative affect about these folks who are just, not engaging enough. They're not, they're stalled. Threatening end therapy. So I've seen this even with some folks who teach couples therapists, and talking about stuck cases, and say, tell people that if they don't start doing their homework, then you're going to end the therapy. Whoa! And I'm suggesting that comes out of personal frustration, and not taking a systemic view of what's happening. And the other, then not getting case consultation. A lot of times these are couples without a lot of, the cases are not urgent. They're coming, they're paying their bills. You basically have liked them. And so often we don't get consultation because we're not, until we get acutely frustrated. So a systems approach to stuck couple cases, it starts with the idea that our three-way system is stuck in a pattern that's not leading to progress. Okay? So our three-way system is stuck, is the way I think of this, not just them being stuck. It's really important to distinguish my goal as the therapist from the client's goals. Elizabeth, my daughter, helped me understand this, that clients, do not owe us any effort to keep changing. They don't owe us. Okay? And so a lot of times what happens in stuck cases is the therapist wants people to get to a place. They've made progress. Again, by definition, the stuck case, they made progress. And then the therapist wants them to get, 2 miles out, beyond where they are. And they're not that interested in it. So distinguishing our goals from theirs, they don't owe us. In couples, accepting the differential levels of motivation to keep working. Some people love therapy and love working on the relationship, and they would stay forever in a maintenance mode, just so that things don't go backwards. And by the way, if you wanted to see people occasionally for that purpose, that's fine. I'm talking more about you're seeing people weekly or biweekly, and there's a sense that they're not making progress. If the therapist no longer feels engaged, that's a problem for the therapeutic system when this is a yawner case. And if you do a case consultation, if the therapist complains about the couple, and I'm using the word complaints, then I'm suggesting it's not only, self with the therapist issue, yes, but there's also trouble in the therapeutic system. We're not aligned. We're not aligned anymore. So I have a system-sensitive protocol that I've used many times. Once I realize that, at least in my view, we're stuck, then I prepare coming into a session and practice. So how am I going to say this? For a conversation about the current state of the therapy. Do not, I'm saying, just blurt it out sometime, partway through a session or after they do a check-in and there's no progress and you're feeling frustrated, and then you blurt something out about, where are we going these days? So you need to be prepared for it, know how you're going to bring this up. Often I'll bring this up. I ask people for their agenda for a session, and I'll say, yeah, I'd like to also put something else on the agenda. And so these are some of the ways I do the protocol. Note how long we've been working together. Say, I'd like to take some time today to reflect on how our work is going. And you notice, I'm going to keep saying this, is how our work is going. That's the systemic part of this. How do you each see how things are going in our work? You've shared over time the progress that you feel you've made from the beginning. And so maybe you could each say where the gains you feel you've made in terms of the goals you brought in with you. And then we talk about how you see what's coming out of our sessions now. Okay, so the positives about the gains, and then how are we doing now? They share their perspective first. So I don't make some big pronouncement. Then I share my perspective, and I like to use terms like progress along the way, good hard work. And then it seems like we've been in a plateau for a period of time. Be interested in your perspective on that. And then it may get more specific, that it seems like in recent months, you've experienced challenges in bringing home what we've been doing here. And so it seems like most of the work is happening here rather than at home. And I don't know if that's how it seems to you. That's the tone that I'm bringing this up. More on the protocol. I normalize plateauing. This happens a lot. People do good work, and then for a period of time, there's a sort of a drift or a plateau. And that when I see that, I like to have a conversation, because this could mean we're winding down a phase of therapy, or maybe there's some important things that we ought to be putting on the agenda and work with more intensity than we have recently. Get the reactions to all of this. You're checking in with people as you do this, of course, not just giving a speech. Sometimes somebody will express a worry that you're going to fire them because they're not working hard enough. And again, you reassure them that you're raising the question about the current state of our work, so we don't just drift. Two outcomes from this. One is a renewed commitment to work in therapy. I'm thinking about a couple who had not really prioritized working on their sexual relationship, and now one of them said, I think before we finish, I really want to work on that. Or a joint no villains decision to wind down. Okay, without anybody being cast as a bad client or me as a not so good therapist. And again, I want to note the language focuses on our work as a therapeutic system. So that's the systems intelligence aspect of this. Some final thoughts, and then we'll have some time for questions. Systems intelligence and relational intelligence can help us be wiser and more helpful in any kind of therapy. This is not just, these ideas are not just for couples or family therapists, but as an individual, when I'm seeing people individually, I think of them both in terms of their internal intrapsychic emotional intelligence, but also their relational system and their dyadic systems and their other interpersonal systems, with my clients being an actor in those, not just somebody who's on the recipient of negative stuff from them. So good therapy, I'm arguing, any kind of therapy can enhance, I would say auto-enhance too, EQ, RQ, and SQ. And we can apply these all three when we get stuck with clients in therapy. And I gave examples of how we can think about the SQ part of the work with clients, with couples when we're stuck in therapy. And I think we can make the world better by spreading systems and relational intelligence. I think our culture has done a better job in our psychological era of putting out into the culture the idea that you need to be able to read your feelings. It's okay to have distressed feelings. It's okay to be depressed. It's okay to feel trauma. It's okay to talk about these things. Come a long way in terms of therapy penetrating the popular culture in ways that normalize a whole set of feelings. Okay, we've done a lot better job with EQ, emotional intelligence, than relational intelligence, and even less so with systems intelligence. And I've been applying all three of these, particularly relational and systems intelligence, to my work on political depolarization in relationships where people are dealing with stress related to the political differences they have, and also to society via my work with Braver Angels, which you can look up, an organization that's using principles from our field to try to heal some of the divides in our country. So those are my thoughts about how we can do better in therapy, how people can do better in their relationships, and how we may be able to make the world better through thinking about relational intelligence and systems intelligence.